Hi and welcome. Today, we will explore how to add right-to-left RTL language support to your adaptive forms. This allows users who speak languages like Arabic, Hebrew, or Farsi to experience your forms in a natural, right-to-left reading format. Out of the box, AEM Forms supports several languages, including English, Spanish, French, and more. You can configure right to left or other additional locales by following the process outlined in this video. The right to left language support is available for both AEM on-premises and cloud service environments. Let's learn a bit about Adaptive Forms authoring. The Adaptive Forms editor allows you to create adaptive forms in English language, and then you can translate and preview the form in language of your choice. This author once and use anywhere approach saves you time and effort, while ensuring a global audience can interact with your form seamlessly. Let's use a purchase request form as an example. This type of form typically has multiple fields, and most fields are required, meaning they must be filled out before the form can be submitted. If you miss any of these required fields, the system will flag them with an error message. Our goal is to translate this form with all its rules and requirements into Hebrew. Before we start, make sure you have a text editor like Visual Studio Code and Git installed and configured. We will use Git to manage code changes. Also ensure the Adaptive Forms core components repository is cloned. If you want AEM Forms Cloud Service, clone the corresponding Cloud Manager repository. If you are using it on-premise deployment or Adobe Managed Services, keep your AEM archetype-based project ready. This video will show you the commands and describe the process to clone the repositories for AEM Forms Cloud Service. I hope you are all set. Let us configure the Hebrew locale for your AEM environment. To start, clone your AEM Cloud Service repository. You can find details of your repository in Adobe Cloud Manager. To find the details and clone your repository, head over to Cloud Manager at my.cloudmanager.adobe.com. Once logged in, select your organization and program. Next, locate the Pipelines card on your program overview page. Click the Access Repo Info button to open a dialog to view the URL of your AEM Cloud Service Git repository, the Git username, and the Git password. The password is displayed when the Generate Password button is clicked. Using these credentials, we will clone the repository. And make changes in that local repository to add support for Hebrew locale, and when ready we will commit the changes back to the Cloud Manager. I hope you are all set. Let us add the Hebrew locale to the Guide Localization Service file. First, open up that repository folder of yours with the text editor you like. I use Visual Studio Code, but feel free to use whatever works for you. In that folder you will find a file called guidelocalizationservice.cfg.json. This file lists all the locales that your Adaptive Forms supports. We are gonna add the Hebrew locale to the list. Usually this file lives under the UI config, then src main content jc or root apps, your app ID osgi config, and finally the config directory. Do not worry if that sounds complicated. I know it is a mouthful. My project's app, it is myproj, but yours will be different. Once you have found the file, open it up. Inside the file add the Hebrew locale code, which is HE, save your changes, and close the file. So we have added Hebrew locale to your project. Now let us add some Hebrew content. This content would represent UI strings, help text, and error messages common to adaptive forms. Adding this content would require us making use of client library. We will show you how to bring a sample client library into your project and add Hebrew content to it. Let's get started. AEM Forms sample library is called Client libIT Custom Locale. We can grab it in a second. Make sure you have Git installed, then open your terminal and type the command to clone the library. Hit Enter, and that will download the whole library for you. Look for a folder named Client libIT Custom Locale inside the downloaded stuff. Found it? Great. Now let's move it to your AEM project. Just copy that folder and paste it right into the client libs folder of your AEM project. Simple as that. Now let's create a file with Hebrew content. First, find the Client libIT Custom Locale folder in your AEM project. Inside that you will see a folder called I18, and this is where we will put our language files. Create a new JSON file in the I18 folder. Name it he.json. We have already created a Hebrew example file for you. Just copy the content from that file and paste it into your new he.json file. That's it. You've added Hebrew to your project. Now let's navigate to a languages folder in your AEM project. Think of it as the control center for languages. If the folder doesn't exist, you will need to create it. Do not worry, it is easy. In the folder, open the contextual file and add locale code for Hebrew language to the list and save the file. All right, we are almost done. The final step is to tell AEM about this languages folder. We do this by adding a little bit of code to a file called filter.xml. Once you have added that, it's time to push your updated project to your AEM cloud service environment. All right, we have done with AEM project-related updates, and now it is time to deploy the updated AEM project to start translating your forms to make them awesome for Hebrew speakers. To deploy the updated code, head over to Cloud Manager at my.cloudmanager.adobe.com. Once logged in, select your organization and program. Next, locate the pipelines card on your program overview page and run the pipeline that has updated code. If you're still unsure which pipeline to use, just go through each one and check out the Source Code tab. That'll help you find the right one. After the pipeline runs successfully, you'll be able to translate and view the adaptive form in Hebrew. Now let's preview your adaptive form in Hebrew locale. To translate a form, open the Forms Manager UI, select the form you want to translate. Then click a dictionary and choose the Create a New Translation Project option. Give your project a name and select Hebrew as the target language. Click Done to create the project. Now let's dive into the project. AEM Forms can use either human or machine translation. We will go with the quick and easy option, machine translation. It uses Microsoft's translation service, so it's pretty reliable. Right now, the translation status is set to draft. Let's change that. Click Start and wait a few seconds. Once it's finished, the status will change to approved, meaning your form is now in Hebrew. Since this is a small form, the translation was quick. Now, head back to the AEM main navigation, go to Forms Manager UI and select the form. Then click Preview and choose the Preview as HTML option. This shows what the form looks like in English for your users. Now let's switch things up and see it in Hebrew. There are a few ways to do this. 1. is to tweak the URL by adding a special code called a locale parameter. Think of it like a secret handshake telling the form which language to speak. To switch the form to Hebrew, add the AF accept lang H E parameter to the URL and hit return. Wow, works. The form is now in Hebrew, thanks to the translation project we set up earlier. Let's see the Hebrew form in action. Notice how everything, the fields, sections or panels, and even the date fields are now being displayed in the format and language conventions used in Hebrew. Even if you try to submit without filling everything in, it asks you to complete the mandatory fields first. Speaking of filling things in, my keyboard is currently set to English, but you can easily switch it to Hebrew and type away in that language. We just saw how to preview a localized form using the locale parameter. Alternatively, the locale can even be picked up from your browser settings. If your browser is set to Hebrew, it would automatically switch the form for you to Hebrew. You now know how to add and configure a new locale for your AEM forms to translate adaptive forms to Hebrew. You can always check our documentation for more information, sample files, and troubleshooting instructions. Thank you, and go create some forms for your native RTL languages.